The house shook. Sirens screamed down the quiet California street. In seconds, they were everywhere. A dozen agents, clad in tactical gear, stormed the front door, their boots pounding against the marble floors of Mac's $1.3 million mansion. She had spent years building this empire, making millions off stolen makeup and luxury goods, and now it was all about to come crashing down in one brutal instant. "Mac Ramirez!" a voice thundered through the chaos. "You're under arrest for theft, conspiracy, organized criminal activity, and money laundering. Get on the ground, now." Mac stood frozen in her living room, staring at the menacing figures filling her house. The world she had carefully crafted, the lavish lifestyle she had curated for herself and her family, was slipping through her fingers. As the agents advanced, their weapons drawn, she finally snapped out of her daze. She took a deep breath. There was no escape now. The life she had worked so hard to build, the empire of stolen goods, the steady stream of cash, the endless Amazon orders, was over. Her mind raced. How did they find me? But before she could process any more, they were on her. They cuffed her wrists with brutal efficiency, and just like that, the empire she had carefully constructed was no more. She was led out of her home, into the cold night air, her hands bound. For the first time in years, she felt powerless. But there was no time for regret. There was no time for mourning what she had lost. Instead, her thoughts drifted to one question. How did it all fall apart so quickly? Let's rewind. It started as a modest venture. Mac was 41 years old, a mom living in Arizona, raising her kids while running a small online reselling business. She wasn't looking to get rich. She just wanted a way to make a decent living from home. She'd buy inexpensive items from wholesalers and flip them on eBay and Amazon, making a small profit. Life was good, nothing extraordinary, just steady. But Mac wasn't the type to settle for good enough. She'd always been ambitious, and she began to feel the itch for something more, something bigger. The margins on her current products were too thin, and her business was growing at a pace that didn't excite her. She wasn't about to spend her life scraping by, running a small-time online store. No, she wanted to build something massive. One day in 2012, Mac had an epiphany. She was at a local department store, doing what she always did, looking for new inventory to sell. But this time, something caught her eye. A row of high-end makeup products, sitting neatly on the shelves under the bright lights. Lancome, NARS, Tarte, Estée Lauder. These weren't just regular items. These were luxury brands. Brands that women coveted. Brands that commanded a premium price. Mac's eyes glinted as she took in the sight. Her mind began to race. The profit potential was massive. These were the kinds of products people would pay top dollar for. The only issue? The cost. She couldn't afford to buy them in bulk, and the stores were tight about selling to resellers. But that's when it hit her. What if I didn't buy them? The thought came out of nowhere. For a brief moment, it seemed absurd. Mac wasn't a thief. She wasn't desperate, but the more she thought about it, the more the idea lingered. What if she stole the makeup and then sold it online for a massive profit? She shook her head as if to clear away the thought, but it wouldn't go away. She kept circling back to it, thinking about how much money she could make. The products were in high demand, and if she could get them for free, she wouldn't have to worry about the markup. She'd have all the inventory she could ever want, and the best part was, it would be all profit. The next day, Mac returned to the store. She wasn't looking for a way out anymore. She was looking for a way in. She started small, a couple of items. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, so she slipped the makeup into her purse. A small rush of excitement coursed through her as she walked out without paying. She had just stolen, and it felt incredible. Mac quickly listed the stolen products on Amazon. The response was immediate. Customers snapped them up faster than she could ship them. The rush wasn't just from the act of stealing. It was from the profit, 100% profit. No overhead, no suppliers, just her, a few stolen items, and the Amazon marketplace. As she sold the stolen products, Mac began to realize just how lucrative this could be. She wasn't just running an online store anymore, she was building a criminal empire. But Mac wasn't satisfied. She had always been driven by more, always hungry for bigger things. Over the next few months, she refined her method. She didn't just take a few items here and there, she started taking entire stockpiles of makeup. She wasn't just a small-time thief anymore. She was running a full-fledged operation, and she was making more money than she had ever dreamed possible. But it didn't stop there. By 2015, Mac realized that the small-time hustle wasn't enough. She needed more. So, she began recruiting a team. Women, young and with criminal records, who had no qualms about stealing in exchange for a paycheck. She found them on Facebook, Instagram, even through mutual acquaintances. These were the California girls. They were perfect for the job, skilled in the art of theft, but eager for money. Mac would send them to different stores, each girl assigned a specific store, a specific list of makeup to steal. She'd text them the instructions, making sure they got exactly what she needed. They weren't just stealing makeup, they were stealing luxury makeup. Lancome, NARS, Tarte. The kind of makeup that cost a fortune at retail, but could be flipped for an even bigger profit. The girls would steal the makeup, hand it over to Mac, and she'd resell it online. It was a brilliant system. They hit stores across California, and soon, the operation expanded into other states: New York, Texas, Florida. Mac's empire was growing. But she wanted more. She wasn't content with just stolen makeup. She wanted more luxury items. So, she began to branch out. Sunglasses, purses, jewelry. And Mac was smart. She didn't just limit her operation to one product. She had her fingers in multiple profitable pies. By 2018, Mac had turned her operation into a nationwide network. She was living a life of luxury, buying high-end homes, driving expensive cars, and building an empire that spanned multiple states. The more she made, the more she wanted. But even as her wealth grew, Mac knew there was no such thing as being too careful. She kept moving her operations, setting up new systems, recruiting new girls, ensuring she stayed a step ahead of the authorities. But the one thing she didn't account for was how quickly things would spiral out of control. As her business expanded, so did her greed, and so did the risk. Apologies for misunderstanding your request earlier. Here's an extended version of the specific part you mentioned with additional details, epic dialogues, and dramatic build-up. It was 2014 when Mac had her first real breakthrough. She had been running her small-time operation for a couple of years now. A mom, an online reseller, turning a modest profit flipping items from stores to Amazon. But that wasn't enough. Mac had always wanted more. She had that itch, the hunger for something bigger, something far beyond what her humble beginnings could have foretold. The idea started small, like a whisper in the back of her mind, but the more she thought about it, the more the potential gripped her. She realized that if she didn't just steal makeup herself, she could have others do it for her. A team. A network of people who could help her gather stolen goods from different locations. That way, the operation would run faster, smoother. She could make more money, expand more quickly. She wasn't just thinking about making extra cash. She was thinking about building a criminal empire. It all came together one cold afternoon, sitting in her Arizona home, scrolling through social media. Mac knew the power of connections, the reach of platforms like Facebook and Instagram. As she watched people post their everyday lives, some photos of vacations, others of random moments, she thought, what if I could use this? What if I could find the right people to help me? Her eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief as the idea blossomed in her mind. She could recruit women, young women with a history of petty theft, who were already familiar with breaking the law. She'd reach out to them, make the offer, help her steal makeup, and she'd pay them well. They didn't have to do anything extravagant, no need to plan elaborate heists. Just steal from stores, drop the goods off at her place, and she'd handle the rest. It was simple. It was brilliant. Without a second thought, she began sending private messages. She found women through mutual acquaintances and social media profiles. The first message she sent to a woman named Jess, whose Instagram was filled with selfies from party nights and poorly lit living rooms, was short but to the point. "I run a small business, reselling high-end makeup on Amazon," Mac wrote. "I need some help sourcing inventory. If you're interested, I can pay you for each job." The response came faster than she expected. "How much are we talking?" Jess replied, curiosity piqued. Mac typed back almost immediately. $500 for a solid haul. I'll cover the details once you're in." It didn't take long before Jess was on board. Mac kept things simple, a few items here and there, nothing too bold. The first job was small, a few foundations, some blush, and lipstick from Ulta. Mac wasn't looking to attract attention just yet, so the operation started modestly. She didn't want to steal too much at once, but what she didn't anticipate was how quickly Jess delivered. The next day, Jess arrived at her house, hands full with several items she'd successfully swiped from the store. Mac grinned, counting the stock in her hands. "That was quick. You've got potential." Jess smiled back, her eyes glittering with excitement. "This is easy money. I like it." From that moment on, everything changed. Mac began recruiting more women, finding them through Facebook groups and Instagram DMs. She built a team of California girls, all in their 20s, all looking for a quick way out of their troubled lives. They weren't shy about their criminal pasts. They didn't care about stealing. They just cared about the money they would earn. Each of them was given instructions on where to go, which stores to hit. Ulta, Sephora, department stores. Mac didn't care where they went, as long as they delivered. She was calculating, sending encrypted messages detailing exactly what makeup to grab, how many to get, and when to return. "Get me 5 Lancome foundations, 6 NARS blushes, and 3 Tarte concealers," Mac texted one day, the list long but precise. "Remember to grab the makeup bags too. We need everything in perfect condition. Don't disappoint me." One of the girls, a young woman named Allie, replied quickly. "Understood, boss." The first successful haul came through in a matter of hours. The girls, who now knew their roles by heart, had become a well-oiled machine. They stuffed their purses with stolen goods, returned to Mac, and handed them over. Mac, in turn, paid them in cash, a little extra to sweeten the deal. They were making money they could never have imagined, all from the stolen luxury makeup that had once seemed out of reach. By late 2015, Mac's Amazon storefront was thriving. She was reselling makeup at a rapid pace, and the profits were multiplying. Her operation had expanded beyond Arizona. Now, her California girls were working across the state, and Mac's Amazon reviews were flooded with glowing feedback from satisfied customers who had no idea the products were stolen. But even then, Mac knew it wasn't enough. She had always wanted more. Her business wasn't just about reselling anymore, it was about scale. Mac wanted to build something bigger, something sustainable. And so, she started sending her California girls across the country. To New York, to Florida, to Texas, anywhere that had high-end makeup to be stolen and resold. "Send them to New York, Florida, Texas. It's time to scale up," Mac instructed one of her senior recruits. "I'm sending you the details. Flights, hotels, everything you need." Each girl was flown to different cities, given funds for a hotel, and then dispatched to hit stores. The operation grew. The more makeup they stole, the more Mac's Amazon storefront exploded. Every stolen product became another building block in the empire Mac was carefully constructing. By 2016, Mac wasn't just living the good life, she was living the best life. She had turned a small-time hustle into an empire, all built on stolen makeup. The money kept coming in, more stolen goods, more inventory, more customers. Mac was on top of the world, and she wasn't about to stop. Kenneth, her husband, had always been by her side, and now he was even more involved. He helped manage the operation from the shadows, making sure everything ran smoothly while Mac pulled the strings. They were a team, an unstoppable force. The $1.3 million mansion in California was only the beginning. But even as she reveled in the success, Mac couldn't shake the feeling that she wanted more. She had done well. She had built something great. But she was never satisfied. Not yet. Not when there were so many stores left to hit, so much more profit to be made. She called her girls together, a handful of them now working for her full time. "It's time," she said, her voice sharp with excitement. "We're going bigger. National expansion. We go across the country now. Miami, Chicago, New York. I'm sending you everywhere. I need you to hit those stores hard. We need more, and I'm going to get it." As Mac sat in her new California mansion, looking over the sprawling property that represented everything she had worked for, she realized something. It wasn't enough. What started as a small hustle in Arizona, flipping inexpensive products online, had transformed into an empire. She had built this from the ground up with her own two hands, using stolen luxury makeup and reselling it for a massive profit. But even with her million-dollar home, her booming Amazon store, and a growing network of criminals, she craved more. She wasn't content with just having one store, one operation. Mac had a hunger, a burning ambition that couldn't be quenched. She had built a criminal empire, but in her mind, it was still just the beginning. She needed to expand, and for that, she needed more people, more girls, more stolen goods, more territory. She wasn't just running a reselling business anymore. She wasn't merely a criminal. She was a mastermind, orchestrating a vast underground operation, pulling the strings of a growing network of thieves. And she knew exactly what she wanted. At first, Mac had worked alone. She'd stolen from a few stores, resold the goods, and made a tidy profit. But as her empire grew, so did the operation. She realized that she couldn't do it all herself. She couldn't be everywhere at once, and the demand for high-end makeup was rising. That's when she turned to the women who had helped her from the very beginning, the California girls. The first recruits had been easy to find. Women with criminal records, women already involved in petty thefts. Mac had started with just a few. They weren't masterminds. They were young women in their 20s, driven by a need for cash, willing to risk it all for the right payday. But Mac quickly realized that if she was going to expand her operation, she would need to build an army. She would need to turn these girls into loyal soldiers, willing to follow orders without question. She turned them into more than thieves. She made them part of her empire. Mac was no longer just a woman stealing makeup off store shelves. She was a criminal architect, a strategist orchestrating every move. She would text her girls with specific instructions, clear, concise orders on what to steal, where to go, and how to stay under the radar. No more small-time theft, no more petty pilfering. Mac was sending them to high-end department stores like Sephora, Ulta, and even Nordstrom, stores where the luxury items could be flipped for huge profits. "Get me the Lancome foundation, the NARS blush, the Tarte concealer. We need high-demand products, ladies," she would text, always meticulous, always precise. The girls knew their role, and Mac's instructions were crystal clear. Steal as much as you can without getting caught. Her empire expanded quickly. By 2016, Mac had built a network of over a dozen women, all strategically placed across the country. They weren't just working in California anymore. Mac was sending the girls across state lines, New York, Florida, Texas, and Chicago, the stolen goods coming in from every direction. The more stores they hit, the more Mac expanded her Amazon storefront. She resold the stolen luxury goods with unmatched efficiency, making so much money that the business was practically running itself. Her criminal empire had become a machine, one that operated seamlessly, without a hitch. And the girls? They were making more money than they had ever dreamed possible. One of Mac's best girls, Jess, had gone from being a petty shoplifter to raking in nearly $57,000 a month, all for stealing makeup. Jess was just one of many. Mac paid them well, very well. The girls weren't just getting by, they were thriving. They had houses, new cars, and a lifestyle that most people only dreamed of. But that was the price of loyalty. Mac wasn't content to sit back and watch the money roll in. She knew she needed to scale the operation, to push the boundaries. She had become obsessed with growth. It wasn't enough to steal from just a few stores anymore. She wanted more. She wanted to dominate. She began to recruit more girls, turning her operation into something far more organized. She found women willing to break the law, hungry for the cash and the lifestyle she was offering. Women with long criminal records, desperate for money. Mac gave them all a purpose. Each recruit was a cog in her machine, working with laser focus, stealing luxury makeup and reselling it for a massive profit. "Don't just grab one or two," she texted them. "Take the whole display. We need it. And don't forget the brushes. Those are worth more than you think." Her messages were always strategic, always cold and calculating. Mac had turned theft into an art, a business, and a lifestyle. But even that wasn't enough. Mac was always thinking of ways to scale. She expanded her operation across the country, targeting new cities and bigger stores. She made sure that every move was calculated, every theft planned to maximize the profit margin. It was no longer just about makeup. It was about building a vast empire of stolen goods. Soon, she was dealing with more than just makeup. She sent her girls to steal sunglasses, designer purses, and luxury handbags. Anything that could be sold on Amazon for a quick profit was fair game. Her empire was becoming unstoppable. Mac's Amazon storefront now had a constant flow of stolen goods, and the money kept pouring in. Every month, she was making hundreds of thousands, if not millions. It wasn't just a business, it was a criminal dynasty. And Mac had built it all herself. But Mac had one problem. She was addicted to the rush. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about winning, beating the system. Every successful heist, every order shipped, was another victory. But victory wasn't enough for Mac. She wanted more. Her ambition grew with each passing day. The more she earned, the more she craved. By 2018, Mac's criminal empire had expanded to the point where she was no longer just living the high life. She had outgrown her life in Arizona. The $1.3 million mansion wasn't enough anymore. She wanted a new challenge, a bigger goal. And so she moved to California, a place where she could grow even more. In California, she bought a new home, a mansion that reflected her success. But Mac knew it wasn't enough. She wanted to expand further. She was already getting greedy, but now the sky was the limit. The world was her playground, and the California girls were her soldiers. It was around 2019 when Mac really began to think big. Up until that point, the operation had been confined to California, with the California girls stealing makeup and luxury goods from stores in their local area. But now, with a new house, a growing business, and millions of dollars flowing in, she wanted to go national. She began sending her girls across the country to steal goods from different cities. She wasn't just content with the West Coast anymore. She wanted to expand the empire and infiltrate every major city in the U.S. Mac wasn't just a local thief now. She was building a nationwide network of criminals who operated in perfect secrecy. She would pay for the girls' flights, book their hotels, and rent them cars so they could move freely between states. The girls would steal from stores in New York, Chicago, Miami, and more, gathering their stolen inventory and sending it back to Mac, who would immediately list it for resale on Amazon. Mac paid for everything: the flights, the hotels, the rental cars, and the stolen goods themselves. The business was booming. And the money? It was pouring in like never before. But as Mac expanded her empire, she became more daring, more greedy. And that's when she made one of the most dangerous decisions of her criminal career. She started recruiting more women to join her operation, more than just the California girls. She began reaching out to women from all over the country, people who had criminal records, women who were desperate for money and willing to take on the risky work. It didn't matter to Mac that these women had no prior experience in organized crime. As long as they could steal, they were good enough for her. The new recruits didn't take long to get up to speed. They were given detailed shopping lists and sent to their assigned stores. The California girls, now more experienced than ever, began training them, showing them how to stuff purses, how to move quickly through the store, and how to avoid detection. Mac's operation was transforming into a well-oiled criminal enterprise that spanned the country. She had created a nationwide network of thieves who were working under her orders, with one goal: steal luxury goods and send them to Mac so she could sell them for a massive profit. But Mac's thirst for wealth didn't stop at stolen makeup and luxury handbags. No, she wanted to expand even further. The California girls began branching out to more expensive, high-ticket items: sunglasses, designer watches, purses from the most coveted brands, even electronics. The list of items they were instructed to steal grew longer by the day. The more they stole, the more Mac demanded. She was living the high life in her new $1.3 million home in California, but it wasn't enough. She needed more. She wanted more. By 2020, Mac's criminal empire was running at full speed. She had turned her small-time operation into a full-scale business, with employees scattered across the country, all working for her and Kenneth. They had built a life of luxury. The couple lived in their massive house, complete with a pool, a hot tub, and a vineyard in their backyard. They had everything they could ever want, all thanks to their illicit operation. But as much as Mac had expanded her operation, as much as she had grown her empire, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. It wasn't fast enough. It wasn't big enough. The money was flowing in, but there was always a sense of urgency behind her decisions. She wasn't going to stop until she had it all, until she ruled the retail world, and that greed would eventually lead to her downfall. Mac's empire had grown into something unstoppable. She had mastered the art of organized retail theft, turning a small operation into a nationwide criminal enterprise. The stolen goods flowed freely through her Amazon storefront, and the profits were astronomical. Her $1.3 million mansion in California became a symbol of her success, a life of luxury built on a mountain of stolen makeup, handbags, electronics, and high-end accessories. But while she had managed to evade detection for so long, there was one thing she couldn't outrun: the law. At first, the thefts went unnoticed. Ulta, Sephora, and other department stores knew that loss prevention was a constant battle, but Mac's operation was so well organized that it was almost invisible. The girls worked efficiently, stealing only what Mac had instructed them to take, never too much at once. They avoided detection by splitting up and never targeting the same stores twice. Mac's communication was flawless. Through WhatsApp and encrypted messages, she kept everyone in line, updating the girls with specific shopping lists for each job. It was a system designed to keep the authorities off her trail. But the truth is, no criminal operation, no matter how meticulous, can stay hidden forever. And Mac's greed was becoming her undoing. The first sign of trouble came when local stores began reporting a higher than usual amount of stolen merchandise. It wasn't just the makeup anymore. The girls had expanded their repertoire to include expensive sunglasses, purses, and even electronics. Mac's business was growing at an exponential rate, but so was the attention it was starting to draw from retail loss prevention teams. They began to notice patterns, the same items disappearing from multiple stores in different cities, often in the same high-demand product categories. Suspicion was growing, but no one had yet connected the dots to Mac. However, what Mac didn't know was that the stores were becoming more vigilant. They were starting to work together and share information about thefts, pooling their resources to investigate. One of the biggest obstacles for authorities was tracking down the stolen goods, but Mac had made a fatal mistake. Her operation was too profitable to stay quiet forever, and soon the authorities would get involved. In early 2023, the first breakthrough came. Surveillance footage from one of the thefts, taken at an Ulta store in Southern California, was passed along to local law enforcement. The footage showed a woman slipping makeup into her purse while shopping casually, checking her phone as she walked around the store. It was subtle, but it was enough to start connecting the dots. Local authorities soon realized that they were dealing with a larger operation, a network of thieves operating under the radar, stealing from multiple stores. The investigation quickly snowballed. Law enforcement agencies, including the California Highway Patrol and Homeland Security, started to follow the trail. They scrutinized the footage, compared notes from store security teams, and realized that the thefts weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a well-coordinated effort that had been going on for years. The stolen products were being resold on Amazon at prices far lower than retail value, and they knew someone had to be behind the operation. Then came the breakthrough. The phone records from one of the girls involved in the thefts revealed texts from Mac, outlining the exact products to steal and the stores to target. The messages were detailed, often including specific models and shades of makeup, as well as precise quantities. The law enforcement team now had their link to Mac. It didn't take long for the FBI to get involved. The investigation ramped up, and the authorities were able to identify several of the California girls who were involved. They had become the weak link in the chain, and their connections to Mac were starting to unravel. Mac had been living a charmed life, thinking she was invincible. She and Kenneth had expanded their operation to new heights, moving stolen goods across state lines and even across the country. But she had made a mistake. She had underestimated the speed and coordination of the authorities. As the investigation gained momentum, Mac's empire began to crumble. The first arrests were made in early 2023. 2 of the California girls were caught red-handed, walking out of an Ulta store with purses stuffed full of stolen makeup. The police swooped in, arresting them on the spot. It wasn't long before the authorities obtained warrants to search their phones. Inside the phones, they found all the evidence they needed. Texts from Mac detailing the exact products to steal, the stores to hit, and the amounts they were expected to bring back. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and Mac was about to face the consequences of her actions. It all came crashing down for Mac in the blink of an eye. The authorities had been closing in on her operation for months, and now the net was tightening. The 2 California girls who had been arrested gave up the names of the others, and soon the FBI had a full list of everyone involved. But it wasn't just the girls that were being targeted. Mac and Kenneth were at the heart of it all. They were the masterminds behind the operation, the ones who had orchestrated the whole thing from the shadows. They had built an empire out of stolen makeup, luxury goods, and a growing criminal network that spanned across state lines. The investigation had moved quickly, and soon the FBI was ready to move in. They had gathered enough evidence to secure arrest warrants for Mac and Kenneth, but what they didn't anticipate was how much they had underestimated just how high Mac had risen. It was the middle of the afternoon when Mac received the call. Her phone buzzed, vibrating violently on the countertop of her kitchen. She was just finishing up her daily check on Amazon orders, packing some makeup to be shipped out to customers, when she picked up the phone. "Mac, it's time," the voice on the other end said. Mac's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the voice immediately. It was one of the girls, a trusted member of her operation who had been sending regular updates. But this time, there was something different in her tone, something that made Mac's pulse race with anxiety. "What do you mean, time?" Mac asked, trying to keep her voice steady. But she could already feel a sense of dread creeping in. "They're coming. I don't know how they found us, but they're here. They're coming for you." Mac's blood ran cold. She looked out the window, as if expecting the FBI to come crashing through the door at any moment. The next few hours passed like a blur. She tried to call Kenneth, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic set in. They had been running their operation for years without getting caught, always one step ahead of the law. But now it was happening. The empire she had built, the one that had made her millions, was about to come crashing down. Within hours, agents surrounded their house. They had tracked her every move, analyzed the phone records, the messages, and the surveillance footage. The sting was set in motion, and there was no escaping it now. Mac, who had once felt invincible, realized she had underestimated the authorities. They had been watching her all along. The doorbell rang. Mac froze. She thought about running, about escaping with Kenneth, about disappearing. But she knew there was no escape this time. They had her cornered. She had spent years building this empire, and now it was all falling apart. It wasn't just the stolen makeup and luxury goods. It was the lives she had manipulated and the countless victims she had hurt along the way. This was it, the end of the line. The door burst open. FBI agents stormed inside, their guns drawn. "Mac, get down on the ground!" one of the agents shouted, his voice firm. "You're under arrest for theft, conspiracy, and a variety of other charges. Don't move." Mac didn't resist. She was too exhausted, too broken. She sank to her knees as they handcuffed her, the reality of it all sinking in. Kenneth wasn't there. He had gone into hiding, leaving Mac to face the consequences alone. The authorities had caught up with them. They were too late to arrest him, but they had enough evidence to put both Mac and Kenneth away for a long time. The arrest of Mac was just the beginning. The FBI didn't stop with her. They knew Kenneth was just as involved in the operation, helping manage the stolen inventory and ensuring the operation ran smoothly. The agents wasted no time tracking him down. They had surveillance footage, records, and enough evidence to prove his involvement in the criminal enterprise. It wasn't long before they caught up with him. Kenneth was arrested the following day, taken into custody without incident. As he was led out of his new house, the one Mac had bought with their illicit gains, the reality of their fall from grace set in. Kenneth, like Mac, had never imagined this day would come. They had been living in a bubble, untouched by the consequences of their actions. But the law had finally caught up with them, and now their empire was in ruins. In the weeks that followed their arrests, Mac and Kenneth were both offered plea deals. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and it was clear they had little chance of walking away without serving time. The couple, once proud of their criminal success, were now at the mercy of the legal system. They both accepted the plea deals. Mac was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for her role in the operation. Kenneth received the same sentence. Both were ordered to forfeit their assets, including their luxurious $1.3 million home, to pay restitution to the companies they had stolen from, including Sephora, Ulta, and other luxury brands. The house was sold, and the proceeds went toward repaying the damages they had caused. It was a bitter pill for both of them. They had lived in opulence for so long, flaunting their wealth, and now they were left with nothing but their prison sentences. Mac and Kenneth's sentencing sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. Their operation had been one of the most successful retail theft schemes in recent history, and their downfall was a cautionary tale for anyone looking to make a quick profit by breaking the law. Their story became a symbol of how greed and desperation could lead to a life of crime, and how it could all unravel in an instant. As Mac served her time in federal prison, she began to reflect on her actions. She had started with the simple idea of reselling makeup online, but that idea had spiraled into something far more dangerous. She had built an empire from stolen goods, manipulating others and exploiting the retail system to her advantage. But in the end, it was her own greed that had brought everything crashing down. Kenneth, meanwhile, faced his own demons. The life they had built together was gone, and the empire they had once ruled was reduced to nothing. He too was left to reflect on the choices they had made, the people they had hurt, and the criminal path they had followed. As for the California girls, some of them flipped on Mac, providing information that helped bring her and Kenneth down. The authorities had made sure to round up every person involved in the operation, but many of the women involved in the thefts were offered plea deals in exchange for their cooperation. Some served short sentences, while others managed to avoid serious time altogether. But Mac and Kenneth's story was far from over. The consequences of their actions would ripple through the retail world for years to come. The years leading up to Mac's arrest had been filled with nothing but success, wealth, and a rapidly expanding empire. But now, as she sat in a holding cell, the weight of her actions settled over her like an unrelenting storm. The house she had built, the sprawling mansion, the luxury items, the fast-paced life of endless profits, it all seemed so far away now. There were no more extravagant purchases, no more Amazon orders rolling in, no more payments to the California girls she had relied on. just cold concrete walls and a future filled with uncertainty. Mac had lived a life of excess, fueled by greed and the thrill of getting away with something bigger than herself. The stolen makeup, the luxury bags, the sunglasses, and even electronics. They had all been pieces in a game she thought she had mastered. But now, all of it was gone. The empire she had carefully cultivated for years was crumbling before her eyes. Her first few days in federal custody were a blur. The reality of her situation hit her like a ton of bricks. She was no longer the mastermind behind a multi-million-dollar operation. She was just another criminal in a holding cell, awaiting her sentence. She thought about her children, the life she had hoped to provide them. Her mind raced with the harsh truth. Her actions had not only destroyed her own life, but had also irrevocably altered the course of her children's futures. It wasn't just Mac and Kenneth who paid the price for their greed. The California girls, the women who had helped execute Mac's operation, were also caught in the net. Some of them were arrested as soon as the authorities had connected the dots, but others were more difficult to track down. The FBI's investigation had expanded nationwide, with agents working tirelessly to locate each participant in Mac's operation. As the arrests continued, the authorities began to build a clearer picture of how the whole thing had worked. They uncovered the complex network of criminals Mac had created, women with criminal records who were willing to do anything for a paycheck, no matter the cost. The girls, some of whom had been recruited from social media, were sent to stores across the country to steal items from Sephora, Ulta, and other high-end retailers. Mac had managed to keep it all hidden for so long, but once the evidence was pieced together, it became clear that her operation was on a massive scale. Each California girl who was arrested faced charges ranging from theft to conspiracy. Some cooperated with law enforcement, providing detailed accounts of the thefts and how Mac had managed to orchestrate the whole thing. In exchange for their cooperation, some of them were given plea deals, their sentences reduced. But others weren't so lucky. Their involvement in Mac's criminal enterprise had been too extensive, and they were left to face the full extent of the law. While Mac and Kenneth faced prison time for their role in the operation, the others weren't so fortunate. The ripple effects of their arrests were widespread, sending shockwaves through the criminal world and serving as a stark reminder of how greed could lead to ruin. Mac's trial came shortly after her arrest, and it was a spectacle. The courtroom was filled with reporters, law enforcement officials, and the families of the victims whose merchandise had been stolen. The prosecution painted Mac as a ruthless criminal mastermind who had exploited young women to build a multi-million-dollar empire based on stolen goods. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Mac had made a single, grievous mistake, but her cooperation with law enforcement should be considered. But no amount of pleading could change the fact that Mac had stolen millions. The courtroom drama played out in full view, with every detail of her criminal enterprise exposed. The most damning evidence came from the surveillance footage and the text messages recovered from the phones of the California girls. The authorities had a mountain of evidence, from lists of stolen products to specific instructions that Mac had sent to the girls. The prosecution argued that Mac's greed had been the driving force behind the operation. She had been motivated not by need, but by an insatiable desire for more. She had gone from stealing small amounts of makeup to expanding her operation into a full-scale retail theft ring. And the more she made, the more she wanted. The indictment included charges for theft, conspiracy, organized criminal activity, and money laundering. Mac's sentencing was a grim affair. As the judge delivered the verdict, the weight of it was clear. Mac was sentenced to 5 years in prison for her role in the operation. Kenneth was sentenced to the same. They were also ordered to pay restitution, a daunting task, given the magnitude of the stolen goods. Mac's mansion was sold off to help cover some of the restitution costs, but the $1.3 million sale barely scratched the surface of the $30 million she had stolen. In the end, the law had caught up with her. The empire Mac had built on stolen makeup and luxury goods was no more.